Okay, here we go. Hmm? Yacht, hey, my relatives. This is Mark Charles. I'm very glad to be here today. I started this a few seconds earlier than I thought, so I was still getting a few things ready. Anyway, it's good to be with you. I want to talk today about the upcoming holiday, Independence Day, the 4th of July, which of course will be this Sunday. Earlier this week, I did a reading of the Declaration of Independence, and today I want to talk some about an article I wrote a few years ago titled "The Dilemma of the 4th of July." And just reflect on one of the challenges facing both Native as well as African Americans and other marginalized people here in the United States around holidays like the 4th of July. Before I begin, I want to do as I always do, which is acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what are now called Washington, D.C., but these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor and thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to publicly state that they are still here, as well as state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. I'm going to share an article with you in the comments section. It's titled "The Dilemma of the 4th of July." And it's one of the articles that I've written over the past decade or so about the 4th of July. This one is published at Native News Online. It's also on my blog and probably a few other places as well. It gets republished usually every year by one or two organizations. And it highlights a story that happened to me maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I was in Gallup, New Mexico, and I was having dinner with some family and some friends at a restaurant in Gallup. And Gallup had just been voted the most patriotic small town in America. I don't know how they won that designation, but they were labeled. They had a big billboard on the freeway, said the most patriotic small town in America. And I was in this restaurant. It was a national chain, and I was sitting down to order our food and eat dinner. And I looked up and I saw this picture. I'm actually going to show you the graphic of it because I took a picture of myself underneath it. But I saw this poster hanging on the wall, and it was well framed, and the entire restaurant was in a very patriotic theme. And this, of course, is a copy of the Declaration of Independence. And I literally almost had to start laughing because this is Gallup, New Mexico, which is a border town to the Navajo Nation. And Gallup cannot exist without the commerce and the money and the businesses coming from both the Navajo Nation, which is just north of Gallup, as well as the Zuni Pueblo and other pueblos south and to the east of Gallup. And yet Gallup is not a very accommodating place to Native peoples whatsoever. But the town literally could not exist. They would go bankrupt if they did not get the money of the people coming in from the Navajo Nation and from the Zuni Pueblo to buy groceries and to eat in the restaurants, and unfortunately to go to the bars and do all the things, the commerce that our people bring to the city of Gallup. And it creates a very dysfunctional dynamic where the city of Gallup enriches itself off of not only the historical oppression of Native peoples, but even the ongoing daily oppression that still exists in our world today. And so this restaurant, which serves a massive clientele of Native peoples, most of the people in the restaurant at any given time of the day or of the year are Native Americans, and many of the servers and the people working in the restaurant are also Native peoples. And it was playing off a very patriotic theme, and it had different founding document copies and other things about patriotism around the restaurant. But this copy of the Declaration of Independence really kind of took my eye, because as you've heard me say before, the Declaration of Independence, 30 lines below the statement, all men are created equal, literally refers to Natives as merciless Indian savages. And so it made me laugh, right? That here in this restaurant, serving Native peoples, eating at the tables, waiting for their food, being served by other Native peoples. This corporate national chain restaurant is displaying a document literally calling all of us savages. And the irony of it, and I actually wrote this in my op-ed. Let me just read this to you so you can kind of get some of the irony. The irony was that the restaurant was filled with Native American customers and employees, and there in plain sight, as poster hanging on the wall was literally calling us savages. And I called the server over to our table, and I just wanted to point out what they were doing. And so I showed them the poster, the one I was sitting underneath, and I showed them the line in the poster, literally calling us savages. And I said, just so you're aware, right, this is something you're publishing here in your restaurant. The server was concerned that I was going to probably raise some kind of a ruckus or create some kind of a scene there. And so I was just really trying to point it out. And after a while, the manager came over and asked me if there was a problem. And again, I just pointed out to them that they were hanging a poster here calling all of us savages. Now, again, the problem with this is, and let me read this because I have this in the article. If the poster had labeled any other group of people as savages, or if the source of the words was anything else besides one of our country's founding documents, the restaurant in question would have long ago been sued, and the parties responsible for hanging the poster most likely disciplined. But because the targeted group was natives, the source was the Declaration of Independence, and the responsibility for hanging the poster, belonged to the restaurant's national corporate offices. Not only is the poster still hanging today, but on July 4th, the entire nation will celebrate the message of this poster and the signing of this declaration. For we have declared it a national holiday, complete with fireworks, parades, and speeches. See, if even in just the past days, there's been some movement by the federal government to remove any monuments or statues of Confederate generals or anything honoring the Confederacy from our nation's public spaces. Right? Why? Well, because again, the mythology is that it was only the Confederacy who was in advocacy of slavery. And so we're trying to erase that out of our nation's collective memory, when in reality, the entire nation condoned slavery. Abraham Lincoln was a blatant white supremacist who constitutionally protected slavery under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. But because we've created this narrative where the Confederacy is the only bad guys, and so now we're trying to rid ourselves of all of these monuments, which I'm not saying is bad. We probably should be getting not honoring these generals anymore. But we also shouldn't be honoring people like Abraham Lincoln and others, Andrew Jackson and others. But we still do, even though they were just as white supremacist and genocidal and condoned slavery just as much as the next group. But again, had this poster designated any other group of people with a dehumanizing term, using the N-word for African Americans or any other term for other minority groups, right? There would have been a huge deal spoken about this. But because it was natives, and again, the legacy of our country is that Europeans discovered these lands, there was no one here. The American Indian race was established to basically breed us out of existence. Our nation still openly celebrates dehumanizing terms used in documents like our Declaration of Independence, and doesn't even know how to acknowledge them. And most people don't even know that they're there. And so this is the problem, because once you see it, right, once you see it, you can't unsee it. In fact, it even gets more and more pronounced the more that you're aware it's there. And again, any other group of people, it would have been pointed out, removed, and we would have dealt with it. But because it's natives, it's still not only kept in there, but it's celebrated. Like we have a whole holiday celebrating this document that refers to us as savages. And again, because we have land titles based on the legal understanding that we're savages and therefore don't have sovereign rights to the land. So this is the dilemma, which is it's not something you can just ignore and say, well, I'm just going to celebrate anyway. This is a national holiday and it's a good time to be together with family and friends. And it's a good way to have a day off work. And, you know, there's fireworks. And yes, we'll celebrate the fact that this was independence from Britain and just ignore the fact that this document dehumanizes us. And so once you're aware it's there, you especially if you're native, you can no longer celebrate this holiday. And then the challenge becomes is what do you do on that day? Because the nation is still charging full steam ahead, right? Where the nation is able to finally, slowly getting to the point where it can call out the Confederacy, but it's nowhere near ready to call out Abraham Lincoln, right? Or the Union. It's not ready to go there at all. And I mean, literally, it was a year ago, right? That our nation capital's football team took another dehumanizing term and dropped their mascot that was dehumanizing. This was a year ago. This wasn't 50 or 100. This was a year ago. And so the dilemma is, what do you do? What do you do when not only is the nation ignorant, willfully ignorant, and unaware of what it's celebrating, but even as it becomes aware, it has no interest in changing it. It has no interest in correcting it. It has no interest in, and using these terms are still completely acceptable and condoned. This is the dilemma where we don't know what to do with these things, right? We're willing to call out the Confederacy. Some are willing to call out Andrew Jackson. A few are willing to call out Columbus. But we're not willing to call out the founding fathers. We're not willing to call out our founding documents. We're not willing to call out the very things this nation is built on. And yet that's where the systemic racism and white supremacy resides. So this is the challenge. And this is the dilemma I face every year. Because our family no longer celebrates the 4th of July. But what do, right? The whole nation takes the day off. There's a national holiday. There's fireworks. There's a national celebration going on. And I've been working, not only me, but many others have been working for not only the past 5-10 years, but for decades, even centuries, to say, hey, there's a problem here that we have to address. But the nation is moving full steam ahead and has no desire to acknowledge these things and to change them. So every year I face this dilemma. Every year I struggle to know what to do. It's been a few years since I actually wrote a new op-ed, just because I feel like I've written everything that needs to be written. This year, this is my second live stream now addressing it. I'm going to do another one tomorrow because we're going through Unsettling Truths, and we're on chapter 6 in the book, which is actually about the founding documents, including the Declaration of Independence. So I'll be addressing it there. And I will probably do one more live stream over the weekend addressing the Declaration of Independence and our systemic racism and white supremacy. But I haven't written anything in a number of years because I've written several documents. If you just Google Mark Charles and 4th of July or Independence Day, you'll see several versions of documents I've written over the past several years that are out there trying to point out and get people to understand what it is we're celebrating as a nation. And so, yeah, I've gone through versions, right? When I first started out, I said, hey, let's just acknowledge it. We can still celebrate it. But as I've learned more and more of our history, and as I've come to understand more of what we've done, I'm like, yeah, I can't participate in this. I can't take part in this. And so I don't, maybe I do want to ruin everybody's 4th of July. We have to find a way to create common memory. We have to find a way to be inclusive of all people. We have to find a way to deal with the systemic racism, sexism, and white supremacy that's not there because of a few bad actors. It's there because this is what our nation was founded on. And we have to find a way to wrestle with that. The chapters in the book, and we'll be talking about this tomorrow, but the chapters in my book dealing with the founding document are also addressing our nation's mythology of American exceptionalism. And this is why in a few weeks we'll be discussing what I refer to as the trauma of white America, the multi-generational communal manifestation of a perpetration-induced traumatic stress at a complex level that I'm convinced our nation is suffering from, especially white America. It spent hundreds of years building a nation based on the dehumanization of Black and Indigenous peoples and other marginalized groups. And it doesn't know what to do with that history. And so it clings desperately to this myth of exceptionalism, because if we're not exceptional, if we don't have a land covenant with the God of Abraham, if we don't have divine justification for committing genocide, then we're merely a colonial, genocidal, enslaving nation that's just never been held accountable. And that thought is unthinkable to white Americans. This is, again, why Joe Biden loves to misquote the Declaration. Not even addressing the savage line, just addressing the sexism in the first line. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created equal is what Joe Biden says, our Declaration says. It doesn't say that. And our nation is still radically sexist, systemically, institutionally sexist. So when he just flippantly changes it, even though he knows it's not what our nation values yet, he may value that, which is good, but our nation doesn't. Then we're not addressing the problem. And the same thing with the white supremacy embedded later in the foundation, in the document. So I encourage you to think about these things, especially tomorrow and Saturday, because if you wait until Sunday, if you wait until the actual 4th of July, it will merely become a distraction of the celebration that you want to participate in. If you don't make a decision beforehand that you're not going to participate, you will end up participating. Our nation is willfully ignorant. It has no interest in addressing these things. It clings to its mythology of exceptionalism so that it doesn't have to worry about things like the Declaration of Independence that refers to natives as savages or excludes women. That's why we cling to this myth of exceptionalism. And so I encourage you to think about what you're going to do this Sunday before you get to Sunday. As I said, I can no longer celebrate this holiday. I can't. Celebrating it even trying to focus or reclaim parts of it about the independence and everything else, would still be acknowledging the dehumanization. It would be condoning the fact that our founding documents dehumanize groups of people. And that is unacceptable. So, yeah, I invite you, I encourage you to think about these things deeply before we get to Sunday. I'm not going to condemn you if you still decide to celebrate it. It took me several years. I remember the first day when I didn't know, and this is going back maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I was actually at a speaking engagement, and I'd given a critique on our Declaration of Independence, but I critiqued the line that said, raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. And I was critiquing that, yeah, this is still clinging to the doctrine of discovery, and it's still, and then someone came up to me and showed me where the document refers to natives as savages. And I just looked, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was there. And that's when I began writing op-eds and addressing it. And at first I was like, well, we can reclaim it. We can, we can still celebrate it, but let's just be aware of what's in there. And it's been over the years where I've gotten more and more to the point of, yeah, I can't celebrate it. So I'm not going to condemn anybody who chooses to celebrate it, even after hearing my talk today or being aware of what's put in there. But I want to change your paradigm, invite you into the journey, get you into the point where you begin to recognize the hypocrisy of our nation that doesn't acknowledge that we have racism and sexism and white supremacy embedded into our foundations, and doesn't begin to ask the uncomfortable questions of what are we going to do about that? How are we going to change those things? I know we're not going to change anything by this coming Sunday. I'm well aware of that. I desperately want to see that change come in my lifetime. I truly want to leave my children a country where we the people truly means all the people. I want our nation to have a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. I want to remove the racism, the sexism, and the white supremacy from our Constitution and our founding documents. I want to build a nation where we the people truly means all the people. I'm convinced it can happen sooner rather than later. I'm convinced we don't need to take baby steps to get there. I'm convinced we don't need to wait for white landowning men to come and save us. But I also acknowledge it's not going to happen overnight. But I do want us to get on that road and on that journey together. I hope this is helpful, my relatives. I welcome you into this uncomfortable journey. And I have to warn you, it's not just Independence Day, and it's not just Columbus Day. It's almost all of our holidays. President's Day, Memorial Day. Our nation celebrates war. Our nation celebrates conquest. Our nation celebrates colonialism. Our nation gives thanks for genocide, which is what Abraham Lincoln did with Thanksgiving. And we have to take a long, hard look at almost all of our national holidays and ask ourselves, what is it we're celebrating? And what can we do about these things to acknowledge the unjust, painful, and oppressive history that we're built on? And make sure that we have holidays that actually include everybody. Yeah, my relatives, I hope this is helpful. I hope you have some good time to ponder this. I welcome you to give some questions on my social media. I'm going to be taking some time, hopefully tomorrow, to try to address some of them. But yeah, walk in beauty. And I hope that we will learn as a nation how to walk in beauty together. Ashahat and Hakonet.